The party had already begun to thin when I noticed Lucas sitting alone on the edge of the couch, his glass untouched for once. Music still pulsed through the apartment, but softer now, like a heartbeat winding down. I had known Lucas long enough to recognize that look, his smile present but distracted, his eyes lingering just a second too long on nothing at all. We were both in our mid-20s, old enough to know better, young enough to pretend we didn't. Lucas and I had been friends since college. The kind of friendship built on shared routines, late-night food runs, half-serious debates, and an unspoken understanding that neither of us ever named. He had been with Daniel for over a year, steady, reliable, the sort of relationship people quietly admired. I liked Daniel. That made everything more complicated, not less. When Lucas laughed too loudly that night or leaned closer than usual, I told myself it was the alcohol, the noise, the nostalgia of being surrounded by familiar faces that I sat beside him, keeping a respectful distance. "You okay?" I asked. Lucas nodded too quickly. "Yeah. Just tired." He wasn't wrong. The party had started hours earlier, and drinks had been poured with a generosity that encouraged poor decisions. Lucas had accepted most of them. I had tried to pace myself, partly out of habit, partly because I didn't trust what I might say if I didn't. Around us, friends hugged their goodbyes and promised to text tomorrow. The apartment slowly emptied until it was just a few of us left, gathering coats, collecting phones, pretending the night hadn't said more than it should. Lucas stood, swayed slightly, then laughed it off. I reached out without thinking, steadying him by the elbow. He didn't pull away. The contact lingered long enough for me to notice, and long enough for me to step back. "Maybe you shouldn't head home like this," I said. "You can crash at my place. It's closer." Lucas hesitated. For a moment, I thought he would insist on calling a ride. Instead, he nodded. "If you're sure." "I'm sure," I replied, hoping my voice didn't reveal the flicker of conflict behind the words. The walk to my apartment was quiet, the city subdued in that late-night way that makes even familiar streets feel temporary. Lucas spoke in fragments, about work, about how fast the year had gone. Daniel's name surfaced once, casually, like a stone dropped into still water. I let it sink without comment. When we reached my building, Lucas leaned against the doorframe, exhaling as if he'd been holding his breath for hours. Inside, the apartment felt smaller than usual. I offered him water, pointed him toward the bathroom, then set out clean sheets. There was only one bed. I told myself it was practical, nothing more. Lucas emerged, calmer now, the sharp edges of the night dulled. He thanked me with a sincerity that made my chest tighten. That we lay down facing opposite directions, a careful arrangement that felt almost ceremonial. The room was dark except for the glow of the streetlight slipping through the curtains. I listened to Lucas's breathing, uneven at first, then slowing. Sleep should have come easily after the long night, but my thoughts refused to settle. Every shared memory replayed with new emphasis, every laugh reframed as something I might have misunderstood, or ignored on purpose. That I wondered if Lucas felt the same pull, or if it was only my imagination filling the quiet. I reminded myself of Daniel, of the line that friendship demands you do not cross. The bed seemed to hold that line between us, thin and fragile. When Lucas shifted, turning slightly toward me, I froze, unsure whether the movement was unconscious or deliberate. The room fell into a deeper silence, charged and uncertain. I stared into the darkness, aware that whatever happened next, whatever we allowed or refused, would shape more than just this night. As sleep hovered just out of reach, I understood that some moments ask for restraint, while others test whether we truly know ourselves. And in that narrow space between waking and dreaming, the night was far from over. I woke to the unfamiliar weight of another presence beside me, the room still dark but no longer silent. Lucas was awake. I could tell by the way his breathing had changed, slower, more deliberate, as if he were listening as carefully as I was. Neither of us spoke. The city outside had gone quiet, leaving only the faint hum of distant traffic and the soft rhythm of two people pretending not to notice how close they were. That I shifted slightly, intending to create space, but Lucas turned at the same time. Our shoulders brushed. It was an ordinary contact, the kind that would mean nothing under different circumstances, yet it felt deliberate now, charged by the hours that had led us here. I stared at the ceiling, reminding myself that nothing had happened, that nothing needed to happen. The reminder felt thin. "Ethan," Lucas said quietly, his voice rough with sleep and something else I didn't want to name. "Yeah. Are you awake?" "I am." He hesitated, then exhaled. "I didn't mean to crawl over. I guess I was restless." "It's fine," I said too quickly. "You're okay." Another pause settled between us. Lucas rolled onto his back, his arm resting between us like a boundary he wasn't sure he wanted to cross. "Tonight got away from me," he said. "I don't usually drink like that." "I know," I replied. "You've had a lot on your mind." He laughed softly, without humor. "You notice more than you let on." I turned toward him then, meeting his gaze in the dim light. "You don't exactly hide it." Lucas was quiet for a moment. "Daniel thinks I'm just stressed," he said. "Work, life, all of it. And maybe that's true. But sometimes I feel like I'm standing still while everything else keeps moving." I listened, aware that this conversation was already stepping into dangerous territory. Still, I didn't stop him. "What do you feel stuck about?" I asked. Lucas glanced at me, his expression open in a way I hadn't seen before. "About who I am when no one's watching," he said. "About the parts of myself I keep editing so everything stays easy." The honesty in his voice unsettled me. I wanted to reach for something safe to say, something that would steer us back to familiar ground. Instead, I said nothing, and the silence answered for me. Lucas's hand shifted, his fingers grazing my wrist. The touch was light, almost accidental, but neither of us moved away. My pulse quickened, each beat a reminder of the choice forming between us. I thought of Daniel again, his trust, his absence tonight, and felt the weight of it settle in my chest. "We shouldn't," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. "I know," Lucas replied immediately. "I'm not asking you to fix anything." "Then what are you asking?" He met my eyes. "I just need to be honest with someone. Even if it's only for a moment." His words disarmed me. I realized then that what was happening wasn't driven by impulse alone but by something deeper, loneliness meeting recognition. That understanding didn't make it right. It only made it harder to step back. When Lucas leaned closer, I didn't retreat. The space between us narrowed until it felt symbolic, a line redrawn by intention rather than accident. That we stayed like that, close but restrained, the air heavy with what we both acknowledged and refused to name. No promises were made. No rules were spoken aloud. Yet something had already shifted. The intimacy of shared truth can be more binding than any physical act, and I felt the consequence of that even as it unfolded. Eventually, Lucas closed his eyes. "I'm sorry if I crossed a line," he said softly. That I swallowed. "I didn't stop you." "That's not an answer," he murmured. "No," I admitted. "It isn't." Sleep came unevenly after that, interrupted by thoughts that circled without resolution. By the time morning light filtered through the curtains, I knew that whatever we called this, confession, closeness, weakness, it had altered something fundamental. As Lucas stirred beside me, pulling away just enough to restore the distance we had lost, I understood that the hardest part wouldn't be what happened in this room, but how we would carry it once the night was over. Morning arrived without relief. Adam woke before the alarm, his thoughts already active, circling the same uneasy truths he had avoided the night before. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that invited reflection rather than rest. He lay still, listening to Mark's breathing beside him, and felt the sharp contrast between physical closeness and emotional distance. Nothing visible had changed, yet Adam sensed that the foundation beneath their marriage had shifted. Over breakfast, Adam spoke less than usual. Mark noticed but said nothing, perhaps out of habit, perhaps out of fatigue. Their routines continued as they always had, coffee poured, doors closed, goodbyes exchanged, but the familiarity felt fragile now, like something that could crack under a careless word. Adam watched Mark leave and wondered how long silence could serve as protection before it turned into betrayal. Ethan stayed out of sight for the next few days, which only intensified Adam's awareness of him. Absence proved more disruptive than presence. Adam replayed their conversation, the careful way Ethan had offered him a choice rather than an escape. That restraint haunted him. It made Adam question his own motives, the quiet longing that had drawn him towards someone who asked so little yet seemed to understand so much. When they finally met again, it was unplanned. Adam was returning home early, his thoughts scattered, when he found Ethan in the hallway. There was no pretense this time, no small talk to soften the moment. They exchanged a brief greeting, and Adam felt the tension settle between them, familiar and unresolved. Ethan spoke first, his tone steady but sincere. He acknowledged the risk of what they were doing, the cost it could carry for both of them. He said he didn't want to become a secret that damaged a life already under strain. The words struck Adam with unexpected force, because they echoed the doubts he had tried to ignore. Ethan wasn't offering romance or rescue, only honesty. Adam responded with more truth than he intended. He admitted that the distance in his marriage had left him feeling invisible, that being seen again had felt like a reminder of something he'd lost. He did not excuse his feelings, but he did not deny them either. Saying the words aloud made them real in a way thoughts never had. They parted without resolution, but not without understanding. Adam returned to his apartment aware that clarity, not temptation, was now his greatest challenge. He could no longer pretend that nothing had happened. Emotional lines, once crossed, did not reset simply because no one was watching. That evening, Mark asked a question he had avoided for weeks. He wanted to know whether Adam was still happy. The simplicity of it left Adam unprepared. He considered offering reassurance, the practiced answer that would preserve peace, but something in him resisted. For the first time in a long while, Adam chose honesty, even though it frightened him. That he spoke carefully, acknowledging the distance between them without assigning blame. Mark listened in silence, his expression unreadable. When Adam finished, the space between them felt heavier, but also more real. Mark admitted he had felt the change too, though he hadn't known how to name it. There was pain in his voice, but also a willingness to confront what they had both avoided. The conversation did not resolve their marriage, but it altered its direction. They agreed to take time, to talk more, to listen differently, to stop pretending that stability alone was enough. Adam did not mention Ethan by name, but the shadow of that truth lingered, unspoken yet present. Later, alone in his room, Adam reflected on the choices unfolding before him. Infidelity, he realized, was not defined by a single act, but by the gradual turning away from one truth toward another. He stood at a crossroads shaped by desire, honesty, and consequence, unsure which path would demand more courage. As night settled in, Adam understood that change had already begun, not because of what had happened, but because of what could no longer be ignored. Whatever came next would require him to decide who he wanted to be, not in secret, but in the open light of accountability. The room was the same, the silence familiar, yet Adam sensed that the story was far from over. Time didn't erase what happened, it only softened the edges enough for me to look at it without flinching. Weeks after that cafe conversation, I found myself replaying ordinary moments with new scrutiny, how easily comfort becomes assumption, how silence can masquerade as consent. Lucas stayed mostly absent, not cruelly, just deliberately. Distance, I learned, can be an act of care when closeness threatens to become harm. I saw Daniel once by chance, crossing the street outside a bookstore. He looked the same as always, focused, self-possessed, yet the sight of him tightened something in my chest. He waved politely, unaware of the quiet fracture beneath his routine. I returned the gesture and kept walking, the encounter reminding me that secrets don't shout, they settle. They ask you to decide who you will be when no one demands an answer. Lucas eventually reached out again, not with explanations but with restraint. A brief message. A check-in. The tone had changed. Where there was once easy familiarity, there was now intention, each word measured. When we met again, it was in daylight, in public, with boundaries restored like furniture returned to its proper place. I'm trying to do this right, Lucas said, hands wrapped around a paper cup he didn't drink from. Not perfect. Just honest. I nodded. That's more than most people manage. He looked relieved, not because I forgave him, but because I understood the effort that we didn't dissect the night. We didn't need to. The truth had already done its work. Lucas spoke about therapy, about learning to name the discomfort before it demanded escape. He spoke about Daniel with care, not defensiveness. Listening, I realized how easy it is to confuse intensity with connection, and how rare it is to choose responsibility when desire offers a faster path. As for me, I learned to sit with my own role without rehearsing excuses. I hadn't been a victim of circumstance, I had been a participant. A willing listener. A steady presence when steadiness carried risk. That admission didn't condemn me, it clarified me. It asked for better decisions next time. Our friendship didn't return to what it was, but it found a truer shape. We stopped leaning into the past and started standing in the present. Sometimes that meant fewer conversations. Sometimes it meant silence that felt clean rather than charged. When we laughed again, it came without the undercurrent of longing that once blurred our edges. Months later, Lucas told me he and Daniel were rebuilding slowly, with rules that favored honesty over comfort. I wished them well and meant it. The wish surprised me with its sincerity. Wanting good for someone else, even when it excludes you, is a quiet kind of growth that I didn't come away untouched. I became more careful with late nights and softer lights, with the stories I told myself when loneliness knocked. I learned that temptation often arrives disguised as understanding, and that empathy, untethered from intention, can drift into betrayal. The line is thin. It asks to be noticed that if this story has an ending, it's not in a door closing or a message left unread. It's in the choice to carry forward what the night revealed without repeating its mistakes. I keep that lesson close now, not as a warning, but as a compass. Some nights invite you to cross a threshold. Others ask you to step back and become someone you can recognize in the morning. This was one of those nights.